Lee Heller, acting as acting chair in the absence of our actual chair, Lori Gaskin, and our vice chair, Betsy Weber, and calling the meeting to order at 5:30 PM, and asking if we can do roll call to start.
Thank you, Madam Vice Acting Chair. So we have Ms. Heller,
Present.
Ms. Rizzo Santino,
Presente.
Mr. Klein,
Present.
and Ms. Owens.
Present.
Thank you.
So the next order of business is approval of the minutes from April 20th, 2022, and we will need a motion and second for that.
So moved.
I'll second.
And would you take a roll call on that, please? Oh, do we do it by acclamation here? Okay. Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. No, no dissent and no abstentions. So the motion passes unanimously. Are there any agenda adjustments?
There are none. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. I don't see anybody here from the public, so there will be no public comment. Thank you. The next agenda item are committee member and staff communications.
There are no communications.
Thank you. So then we move on to our business items, the first of which is the Water Quality Research and Monitoring Program update and proposed fiscal year 2023 research and monitoring plan, which Dr. Jill Murray will be presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Heller. Since I'm introducing myself, I am the Water Quality Research Analyst for the Creeks Division, and I generally come to the committee twice a year in June to propose the next year's research plan, and then in December to review the prior fiscal or water year's research results. So let's see. Okay, so I'll be going over the research plan for FY23, talk a little bit about what we've done in FY22, but again, you'll hear more about that in December, and then just review next steps. So our research and monitoring program, just some background, is that we always have to include some required monitoring. We have monitoring that's required by our stormwater permit, and we usually have some monitoring that's required by grants, whether they're research grants or restoration grants that might include a monitoring component. Then we usually have some standalone research projects. We are always changing, and as questions come up, and the questions can come up from other staff, from scientific literature, from committee members, the public, I really encourage anyone to reach out if they have any interesting issues. And we update this annually. And last year, our FY22 research plan, which we brought here in June of 21, was a real change from the prior years. And that was, it was the 20-year anniversary of the Creeks Division. It was time to kind of take in some of the lessons learned. When I first got this position, we were really working on trying to understand a lot of stormwater treatment and filters and bioswales, and then over time, both what we've learned and what the larger community has learned is that we're focusing more on infiltration and true source reduction. We've got now other environmental challenges that we're working with. So we've got sea level rise and drought. An example of that is when I first came here, we were putting in some storm drain diversions that took like the summer, what used to be called nuisance flow, and diverted that to our sewer system for treatment. And we learned through studies that that water in most cases was actually pretty clean, and we wanted it in the creeks for fish and aquatic organisms, especially as drought has persisted. And also there have been a lot of equipment advances. Some of the things that we used to talk about, like just being able to put a logger in a creek and get the minute by minute oxygen readings was way too expensive and cumbersome. The risk of vandalism, it made the expense just not really worth it, and now everything has just gotten more affordable. And so we're moving forward. We're trying to develop a more contemporary and updated plan. But for FY23, FY23 will follow a lot of what we started last year. We're not going to revamp again yet. But backing up even a little bit more, why are we even doing all this? We're trying to develop strategies for water quality improvement. So we're trying to take what we learn and give that to the rest of the staff to help inform them about projects. And we're often collecting baseline data for future projects. We are always, and it's the most common question we get, is looking for changes over time in surface water quality, surface meaning streams and creeks, and always wanting to communicate effectively with the public about water quality. And for the public, that's often related to beach water quality and swimming risk. And then we also want to understand the role of climate change and sea level rise in altering creek conditions, and a lot of that would be changing estuarine conditions. And so with that kind of background, then what we want to do for our specific goals is to assess, really identify pollutants of concern. And so some of those are new, and we're always, as soon as one pesticide is regulated more, another one comes on board. We never even heard about microplastics 10 years ago. And so then and the way that we figure out what's a pollutant of concern is first we identify it, we test for it, we see that it's there in the creeks. We get the actual levels, and that can be a concentration in the creek during a storm or dry weather. It can also be the total load. Like for microplastics, I know the concentration in the creeks is really low, but when you sum that over an entire storm, then you're impacting the ocean. And then evaluating the harm, the potential harm. And so within a creek, that usually means we're taking the concentrations of a pollutant that we're seeing in the creek, and we're comparing it to known levels of toxicity that are available and saying, is this above or below? And then once we find that there's a problem with a pollutant of concern, then we're trying to figure out where it's getting into the creeks, when it's getting in, how it's getting there. And that we call source tracking. For every project that we put in, if possible, we want to evaluate the performance. We want to, and this is more of a future goal, implement hydrologic models of creeks in order to predict alterations in flow due to climate change. So we don't know yet if there are going to be more frequent storms or more intense storms. A lot of times it's just assumed that that's true, but it's not necessarily true. That hasn't been shown for creek flow around here yet. Also, and I think this is going to be really important, we're not going to solve this year, but this is a kind of multi-year thing. Evaluate the role of infiltration and groundwater movement on creek water quality and quantity, including the intersection with sea level rise. And where feasible, evaluate the effectiveness of city programs such as street sweeping and outreach in reducing pollutants. As I said, we always want to evaluate long-term trends, which is really difficult to do. Meet our grant requirements, our permit requirements. We're often, every time the State Water Board's 303D list of impaired waters is updated, we take a look at that and say, okay, does this make sense? If it does make sense, let's try to figure out where this impairment is coming from. Maybe this isn't something that we considered before. If we think it's something that probably was put on in a way that it doesn't make sense to us ecologically or impact-wise, then we might go collect samples to try to encourage the water to be delisted. And we want to use the most cutting-edge tools that we can. So we have 4 areas that we're focusing on this year, 4 big areas. One is our kind of typical monitoring. We have permit required monitoring, our stormwater permit. We have to test flowing outfalls every year. We have a sampling plan that was approved by the regional board for our sampling, targeting some 303D listed waters, Mission Creek. We have special studies that's also required by the regional board and approved by the regional board, and on that one, we continue to quantify the pollutant load that's reduced by projects that we've put in the ground. For long-term monitoring, that's mostly our biweekly and quarterly sampling of indicator bacteria, and then the field parameters like temperature, pH, conductivity, and then the bioassessment, which you heard about recently. And the projects that we're monitoring right now are the Bird Refuge, Arroyo Open Space, Barger Canyon, and the bioretention planters right across the street. Okay, so the other, at the second area is the Laguna watershed. I've mentioned before that we had some storm samples a couple of years ago where we were seeing some contamination signals that looked like some kind of untreated wastewater could be getting in the Laguna Channel. And so we've also worked with Dr. Holden at UCSB. She's done some dry weather sampling with the DNA-based markers. Now we're putting those two together and trying to figure out what is going on in Laguna. And so for the summer, we did sampling with Dr. Holden. We're still analyzing those results, and we'll continue to do that. And then we'll also do storm monitoring. And so for the first time, we'll have the chemistry and the DNA-based tools on storm results, and that is possible because we can now collect samples and for Dr. Holden and filter them in-house. And that is because of our new code enforcement officer, Natalie Tees, brought on that ability from her previous employment. So that's great. It was really difficult to plan with UCSB on a small contract for them to like jump in and do the storm sampling. It was too difficult. But they'll be able to process the samples and help us plan and analyze the data. And so we'll do that in 2 to 3 storms. We haven't decided how many samples to collect per storm yet. And we'll be, I'll get into this more, but we'll be in the storm drains and Laguna Channel. Okay, the third topic, major effort is to increase our automated equipment. And this is ongoing from FY22. We want to identify priority locations for doing more flow gauges and because there really are surprisingly few flow gauges in the city. And now that we can put in these loggers that just measure the depth every 20 minutes, we can install a network of those. And also the depth loggers have been around for a while, but the water quality loggers are getting better and better and more affordable. And so we'll research and purchase equipment. Some of that will probably go into the even year after that. And we'll have to install housings for all of the equipment that makes it resistant to theft. And this is a big project, is developing a data management plan. And I can tell we're not the only ones with this because I keep getting a lot of notifications about webinars put on by the State Water Board or the US EPA about how to create workflows with all of this massive amount of data. And then the last topic, and I talked about this a little bit in December, I talked about this. We've done a lot of work with UCSB, and some of that was funded by the Creeks Division. Some of it was much larger research projects that they were funded by the State Water Board. But the consistent conclusion is that there is some signal that they're finding of their human waste marker pretty consistently. It's at very low levels, and it does not appear to pose any kind of health risk. But we really want to stop just saying it that way, and we want to be more quantitative. So we've recently awarded a small, a contract to Dr. Holden at UCSB, and they're going to perform what's called a quantitative microbial risk assessment. So they go collect samples, they see which pathogens are present, which human waste markers are present, and then compare those to what's known in the scientific literature about how dose response curves, so how much of each pollutant would you need to get sick, and then compare them to water quality standards. And it's the first time we've done this. In all of our years of doing the source tracking work in Santa Barbara, we haven't done a quantitative microbial risk assessment. And this seems like the time is right because we have so much prior data to look back on. And the Clean Water Act implication for this is that there is a possibility, for example, if there were a lower risk expected than even the typical beach warning risk, that we could say, let's not go on our indicator bacteria tests that the county collects every week. Let's use our own site-specific criteria, which we can show has a lower risk than that. And that would be years down the road. But there is some legal basis to be able to do that, depending on results. Okay, now I'm going to switch to just giving a little bit of an update on what we've been up to. We had the grant from the UCSB Associated Students Coastal Fund. That was a grant to UCSB, but we reached out to UCSB and said we really want to do a microplastic project. And so the graduate students, Rebecca Reynolds and Timnit Kefala, completed the project. We assisted with sampling. In fact, we collected a lot of the samples for this, storm samples, and then we were also looking at the role of street sweeping and the potential for street sweeping to remove microplastic from streets. And so we swept the street, we collected street sweeper debris out of the trucks and sent that off to UCSB. So they still are analyzing the samples. It takes a long time, but the kind of commitment that they made, the final report for the grant has been submitted. And I point out that we did this with a $3,000 match from the city for supplies, because what's really great is that jumping down to future work, Rebecca Reynolds now has a 3-year grant to continue graduate studies, and that came from a separate source. That was she'll be doing that, independently as a PhD student, but will act as a stakeholder and assist with sampling. So that's I love it when this happens. We put in a little bit of seed money, and then the larger projects roll out. But their preliminary results, that shows Natalie. We were sweeping streets after the street sweeper went by to see what was left. Yeah. So so hopefully, we definitely found that over the course of a storm, there's a lot of microplastic discharged. We found it in some of the street dirt and some of the street sweeper debris that they collected, but we don't yet know what fraction of microplastic, and this would be kind of an estimate based on their results that they'll calculate for us, that could be removed by street sweeping. And I hope it's really high. We know we've modeled that we remove about 10% of sediment by street sweeping. So if we could do the same for microplastic, that'd be great, or more. Oh, here's a picture. Okay, so on the right is the dustpan, and then you can see zoomed in on the left, you can see one tiny piece where the green arrow is pointing of blue. Looks like blue film. One of the areas that we went to, the street looked really clean when we got there because the street sweeper had just gone by, but someone in front of the house said, "Oh, do you mind if I'm weed whacking while you're doing this?" And I said, "No," because I didn't want to be covered by grass. But then we actually found a lot of little blue microplastic there, which might have been coming off of the weed whacker, and did not get picked up by street sweeping in that case. Okay, now a little bit about our Laguna Channel source tracking. Penny might be the only one. I don't know how long you've been on the committee, but we did a Laguna watershed study in 2008, okay? And so we have the storm drains really well mapped. We had prior results of finding some human waste marker. We were able to find a couple of major issues and fix them. But we still know we still have this signal of something coming out. So as I mentioned, we sampled in this fall. We collected samples from, it's the first time we've been back up in storm drains since 2008. Sampled in the channel and some storm drains. And this time, for the first time, we sampled in some shallow groundwater wells. And we had positive controls with sewage and recycled water. And we did this repeatedly over 3 days. And UCSB processed the samples for the DNA-based markers. We sent off samples for some chemistry to WEC labs. And then I haven't talked to, some of you have never heard anything about this, and we'll save this for a later date. The neonic pesticides, we sent those off to SGS labs. We've done a lot of prior work on neonics. And this is just, I'm not going to go into details here, but this just shows part of the watershed and where there's sewer, where there's storm drain, where there's recycled water, where we sampled for groundwater. And we found frequent detections of a lot of different compounds at really low concentrations. We're still doing the spatial analysis to see how consistent the results were from drain to drain, and whether it looks like, any one arm of the storm drain network has more of an issue than another. And we'll definitely use those results to inform the planning for our storm monitoring where we keep this. And this is a picture of a shallow groundwater well. These wells are all over the city for monitoring like contaminated storage tanks that are underground. But we found a couple where that monitoring was done, but they hadn't filled up the well yet, and we're able to find. Potentially, this is just a really great way to sample throughout the city. And I'll wrap up by just going over our next steps. We're just continuing our required monitoring. We have to develop our sampling plan for the winter for Laguna, keep going with our automated equipment purchase plan, and then I'll come back to the CAC in December with more thorough results. And so we're asking for your recommendation to implement this proposed research plan. And I'll take any questions too.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Yes, I have some questions. Thank you. Getting back to quantitative microbial risk assessment, you mentioned certain sites where samples are gathered. Can I get a better understanding of where those sites are? Are they, as an example, urban versus rural or both?
Okay, let's see. No. Just want to make sure we're in the right place. Okay. So are you, Mr. Klein, are you talking about previous work that we've done or where we're planning to sample this time?
I guess the questions come from this presentation. You talked about goals, so I assume that's future, yeah, rather than past.
Okay, so this project will be, we actually have not decided, we haven't made our sampling plan for this project yet. We've done a lot of work, and UCSB has done a lot of work at East Beach at Sycamore, at East Beach, less work East Beach at Mission, and a lot of work at Ledbetter, and then a modest amount of work at Arroyo Burro over different years, different projects. We'll probably hit all of those beaches. I think it would probably be best to hit all of the beaches and have fewer samples rather than try to do more samples at one or two beaches. But we'll be getting together, have a kickoff meeting for that project. And, but I'll bring up one thing that you mentioned, urban versus rural. In previous studies, that was one of our questions, maybe this stuff is just everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they did sample at Arroyo Hondo, the beach below Arroyo Hondo, which is fairly pristine, and didn't find any signals of any human waste markers present.
Got it. Thank you. You mentioned gathering material after the street sweeper had passed, right? And I wonder, what's the target for a street sweeper to collect, in a sense of someone's paying for street sweeping, and how much of this material that might be hazardous for waterways is collected, and what's a reasonable expectation of that? I have no knowledge about the efficacy of street sweeping. I apologize, but it seems like one might be connected to the other.
I don't think that there's one answer to that question, and but we did do like I said, we did a model of what we would expect to be coming off the streets without street sweeping, and then with street sweeping, and we came up with about 10%, that we're moving about 10% of the sediment, but we don't know how much of the other associated pollutants we're removing. There have been some pretty thorough studies in some other areas with really like looking at metals around industrial areas and trying to figure out what fraction was being removed by street sweeping. But I don't think that I haven't seen a very good estimate of it community-wide. And I will say, actually, our 10% number comes from being required by the Water Board to do a community program-wide model of sediment removal, which I could have protested along the way, but it's nice to be able to go back and look at that number.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for both answers. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
No, I just want to say thanks for the thorough presentation. It's really exciting to hear updates about past research projects and plans and goals for the future. Some great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owens.
Any public comment? Seeing none, if you can get us to your final slide, that will help to move us forward with our next step. So we are looking for a motion and second for our action to concur with the staff recommendation to implement the proposed research and monitoring plan for fiscal year 2023. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
And I presume this is a roll call vote? No? Okay, so again, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Murray, for that excellent presentation. And we're going to move on now to a presentation on the Education and Outreach Program update by Liz Smith, who is the Creeks Education and Outreach Coordinator.
I broke it. Okay, good evening. Thanks for having me. As Ms. Heller said, my name is Liz Smith. I'm the Creeks Outreach Coordinator, and I'm here to give you an update on our education and outreach programs. And I did present to you a pretty thorough overview, but just in December, so I'm just kind of do some highlights tonight and then talk a little bit about our education plan goals. So we will jump right in. So our education and outreach programs are guided by the city's stormwater management program, or SWIMP, which I'm sure you hear about a lot. We have a Creeks Division public education plan, and we also do public awareness surveys every 5 years to kind of see how we're doing, if people are getting our messaging. Youth watershed education, we contract with Explore Ecology, and we have a goal to reach 3,000 students every year. The past 2 years, we've come really close. I'm really impressed with Explore Ecology during COVID. They really pivoted to online presentations and field trips, virtual field trips. And we got really close to that 3,000 goal, but we didn't quite hit it. So we've already surpassed it this year. So that's really wonderful to kind of be back on track, reaching out to students. And these are free programs to schools within the city, and they include in-class presentations, field trips. They're still offering the online live presentations. And they've just recently begun an on-campus Clean Earth Club at a few schools where they're there during lunchtime providing presentations, doing like a trash cleanup challenge type of event with the students. So, and their school year has ended, but they were kind of really building interest in that program and getting more schools involved. So that has been really wonderful. We attend a lot of community events, and again, with COVID, it's kind of been sparse the last couple of years. The Earth Day Festival, as you know, was canceled in 2020. It was held online in 2021, and we did participate. But this year, we were fortunate to be back in person. I saw a few of you there. We were at the Arlington, and this year, for the first time, regarding Earth Day, I believe next year they're planning to be back at Alameda Park. So we'll be really excited to be there with the community again. This year, for the first time, we participated in the library's Book to Action series. They do programming around a book each year. This year it was Island Visions, and Penny and I presented together. We co-hosted a talk called Be Watershed Wise. We talked about, what is a watershed, what our respective programs do to protect our creeks and ocean, and we kind of did an introduction to pollution and what to look for when you're out in the community and what to report. So if you see, anything other than clean water running down the street, or if it's not raining, should you report it? And we kind of made it hopefully fun for viewers. We did like a little quiz and got the viewers engaged with us. So it was a lot of fun to participate in that. We also had a couple of ribbon cutting events this year for our Bonet Park Stormwater Improvement Project and the Arroyo Burrow Open Space Restoration. We have our annual Creek Week celebration coming up in September. This is, it will be September 17th through 24th this year, and the way that we advertise this in the community, we have our website, Facebook, we run print ads in various news outlets, we run TV, online, social media, the city's water billing insert. So we just really try to get that word out to the community as much as we possibly can for Creek Week. And I would like to highlight some of the volunteers that we work with. We work with many volunteers throughout the year on creek and beach cleanups, native planting, invasive plant removal, and sometimes storm drain marking. And so this past year, we've worked with Nomad, LinkedIn, Kate School, Kiwanis, RRM Design, Urban Creeks Council, and next week I'll be going out with Arthrex, a local company, to do a beach cleanup. So we are always happy to work with community organizations and groups to plan events to get people out serving the community. And I would also highlight our Adopt a Beach program, which is a California Coastal Commission program that we administer on city beaches. And so these are some long-term groups like Channel Keeper and Urban Creeks, and our newest group is Umbra, another local business that has committed to cleaning up the beach. So we really thank these local organizations for helping protect our environment. And advertising, we run TV, online, radio, advertising throughout the year, and we have our Creeks of the Beach campaign. When I tried to show you this in December, we had some technical difficulties, so I was going to try again, and it looks like it's not going to cooperate. Okay. Well, you can view it on our YouTube channel. I apologize that this isn't working again. So we had original music produced by a local musician, and these ads were TikTok inspired, and we have the corresponding radio ads as well as print. And we were also running corresponding ads on the buses. And these are the interior ads that are currently on the full fleet of MTD buses. And they, each one is a little bit different. We had over 100 volunteers participate in this commercial, so we tried to use as many of the photos as we could to let everybody get their little 15 minutes of fame. And so these, all of the ads focus on kind of the suite of pollutants that we're always looking to tackle, like cigarette butts, pesticides, fertilizers, litter, dog waste, and then also just general storm drain awareness. So this one is an example. Storm drains flow to our creeks and ocean, help keep trash out of our storm drains. And then that is a shared contract, the MTD advertising. We share that with County Project Clean Water and the City of Goleta, so we collaborate on these ads. And the larger ad at the bottom is our exterior ads that are on the buses right now. So we do those during the summer months. And again, that's just kind of storm drain awareness. Like, here's our beautiful beach, that's what we're trying to protect. But it matters what we do all over the city. So that's the idea that we're trying to get across. So online, hopefully I won't get in trouble for showing you a sneak peek of our new website that's gonna launch in about 2 weeks here. So we have been really working on that for over a year, but it's really ramping up right now. We're getting all of the content cleaned up and everything put together. So we're really excited to have this new website launch for the city. Our part of the website, sbcreeks.com, we had over 11,000 visits so far this year, which is, it's more than most years, but it's less than last year. So last year we had a job opening, we had a lot of changes to the SWIMP technical guidance manual. So the community was super interested in that. So last year we saw really shoot up in visits, but this is kind of more back to normal. And our other online outreach includes our email newsletters. We have our Creeks Division e-news that I hope you're all signed up for. We have our City News in Brief, where we can also send out emails or send out information in the city administrator's newsletter. We also have our social media presence: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Nextdoor, and TikTok. So moving on to the next part of my presentation. So the Creeks Division has a public education plan that is a giant document that was produced in 2002, and it's not something that we really reference very often. Usually when we go to our 5-year survey, we say, oh, let's look back at these goals and see what it is that we need to be asking questions about, what we're supposed to be measuring. So I met with our Education and Outreach Subcommittee in April, and it was Mr. Klein, Ms. Heller, and Ms. Silva. And we looked at the goals in the original education plan and really tried to update them. One, to kind of better align with the SWIMP goals, our outreach goals that are provided there, and also to make them more measurable, I think. Things that are easier to measure and things that we can ask in our surveys of the community. So we made some some edits here. So this is our increased public awareness of stormwater pollution causes. And so again, this is kind of our suite of pollutants that we often talk about. So runoff from washing cars, dog waste, pesticides and fertilizers, trash, of course. We had one here about elementary students identifying sources of water pollution. And we're not eliminating that, we're just moving it to kind of just reorganize the goals a little bit and have them make sense. And we also added auto fluids as a new one because that is something that we're often doing outreach around. And it is something that we ask about in our surveys. You know, are people aware that auto fluids are a serious problem? So again, kind of making these align with the survey, with the SWIMP, with what we're doing. So that is goal number 1, and the sub-goals, I guess we can call them. Goal number 2 is increase understanding of the role of storm drains. So again, I talk about a lot of outreach around just storm drain awareness, understanding that storm drains flow into the creeks and the ocean without treatment. And so again, we just took the elementary school student one and incorporated that lower below. We got rid of the express willingness question. When it comes time to do our surveys, it's really limited. We have to kind of pare down what we can ask because you can only keep people on the line answering questions for so long. So asking, you know, are you willing to change behavior? We thought maybe that's not as important as like, have you made changes to your behavior to protect? So we eliminated that one. So our new number 3, our old number 4 becomes number 3. And we want to increase the percentage of those who report making a permanent change. And so who say they've made a change in the last year, and then also increase the number of businesses using BMPs to reduce pollution, and that's measured through our Clean Creeks Certified Business Program. So again, it's important that it's measurable for us. And then our goal number 5 became number 4, and we changed it a bit. It used to be reinvigorate or maintain goodwill towards the Creeks program. And I think that was a kind of a holdover from when the program was first established, and it was under a lot of scrutiny. You know, it was a new thing. It was a lot of money from the hotel and lodging industry, and not that we don't want community goodwill and support, but we felt that engaging the community in our events is a better way to measure that than just having this goal here that we don't really know how to measure. So I think increasing community awareness of our projects and programs through youth education, events, social media, and our newsletter. So that's how we can kind of measure our goodwill from the community. And so we have reached our 3,000 students through youth watershed education programs. So that's where we incorporated those 2 sub-goals from above. And then maintain or increase number of participants in our community events and volunteer programs, and increase subscribers to our email newsletter and social media accounts. So these are all, again, things that are more measurable than, you know, maintain goodwill. And then, as I mentioned, this plan, the original plan is not something that we reference very often. So I'd like to, taking a cue from Dr. Murray, where she comes to you every year and she says, hey, here's what I want to work on. So kind of coming to you and meeting with the subcommittee and the larger committee, and just kind of talk about what we'd like to do in the coming year. And this is, of course, not an exhaustive list. It's not limiting in any way. I feel like we're pretty flexible and nimble with our outreach efforts. But we would like to continue messaging focused on general storm drain awareness, of course. We want to improve that awareness. And then our suite of pesticides, our suite of pollutants, dog waste, pesticides, litter, all of these pollutants that we're always talking about a lot. And then additional pollutants of concern, as Jill mentioned, you know, neonic pesticides, microplastics. These are kind of new things that we're finding in our stormwater, and we want to tell the community about it. Hey, we're finding this. Here's how you can help. So again, it's including these, but not limited to these pollutants. We're easygoing, and we'd like to change and talk about whatever is going on and emerging. So, and then also we do a lot of outreach around our restoration and water quality improvement projects, and so we will continue all of these. And then I have some tactics to initiate or improve upon. And so online radio is not something that we have done yet, and I would really like to expand our advertising into that. Spanish language outreach, we do quite a bit, TV, radio, some print. All of our outreach materials are translated into Spanish. but we'd like to do more print in Spanish language news outlets, and then also online with the new website, really improve translation of the website content. And then social media engagement, really working on improving posting consistency and utilizing social media advertising. You know, it's relatively inexpensive. It's where people are. So if we can get our messaging in front of them, that's wonderful. And just as an FYI, we will have some larger projects coming up in the next year here in spring or summer. We'll be working with City TV. Every other year, we produce new television ads with City TV. So if you have any ideas, let me know. And then we always kind of put together a cohesive campaign with the radio, print, bus, online that all coordinate with our television outreach campaigns. And then coming up in summer, fall, we'll be going out for proposals to get a consultant to do our public awareness survey that we do about every 5 years. So those are kind of the big picture things coming up in the next year. And so I am asking for action to adopt our proposed goals and for the whole program and also for the coming year. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Ms. Smith. Are there any comments or questions from committee members?
I do have a couple of questions. One is, have you reached out to the Sea League? They are a community organization that aims to expose youth of color, primarily Black youth, to outdoor water sports like surfing. And they do beach cleanups. And I have a good connection with them, so if you would like any support on that, happy to help as well, if that hasn't happened. And then also regarding the radio, just wondering if you've tried to do anything with KZAA 96.5 FM, which is our local radio station that I actually have my radio show on. I interviewed Jen on it before. So, you know, like you could also come on it, Liz, and talk about what's coming up with Creek Week, and we could do a PSA too. So, yeah, that would be fun if you would like to do that as well.
That would be great. Thank you. I have heard of your radio station, and I knew that you had a show. It would be wonderful to participate in that. I had not heard of the other program, Sealy, you mentioned. Love to be involved. So, yeah, if you have a contact, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Other questions or comments from the committee?
No questions, but I'd just like to say thank you, Liz. That's great, and thanks to the subcommittee. I think many of you were here for your work updating that plan. That's excellent to see those updates, and I'm happy to make a motion.
Before we did that, I actually had a question myself, if that's okay. You spoke early on about the role of Explore Ecology, and what I was wondering is, because we also have a science educator in the room, Councilmember Sneddon is here, and I don't know how much of a role the city plays in determining outreach into the schools, or if we're just contracting with Explore Ecology and letting them do their thing. But we have a unified school district, and I'm wondering if there's been any exploration of a way to get the discussion of creeks and water quality into the curriculum district-wide.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Explore Ecology, they do kind of do their own thing. We're in contact frequently when they have, you know, ideas for new programs like the lunchtime club, and they do align with the state curriculum. And I know that watersheds, you know, that is, I think it's 4th grade. Jen probably knows better than I do. I think it's 4th grade when watersheds is in the curriculum. And so we are kind of targeting that age group, but it's open to the further age. It's open to any age group within the schools. So a lot of the teachers do tend to do it in that grade when they're already working on watersheds, though. So, yeah. And they have a great working relationship with the school district.
Thank you so much. Before we go to a motion, is there any public comment? Thank you. So I would be happy to entertain a motion.
Apologies that I jumped the gun.
No worries.
I don't have my piece in front of me, but I am happy to make a motion to adopt the proposed updated public education plan goals and approve the proposed fiscal year 2023 goals and priorities.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Ms. Smith. I believe there is no further business with the committee tonight. And so that being the case, we're probably ready to adjourn. So I'm going to call for adjournment. Thank you all so much for attending this evening. We are adjourned.